one of the most important things we learn is to sort of trust what appear to be either mistakes or mishaps that might actually seem like an obstacle to getting the film done. But by staying kind of in a positive state, and here's kind of where the spiritual side comes in, we found out that the things that were happening and the things we were forced to do and the directions we were forced to go down because of these so-called errors or mistakes or quote unquote negative things that happened actually gave us more opportunity to improve the film.
Welcome to the Filmosophers Movie Talk Show. I'm Chris Bush.
I'm Dean Slider.
On the Filmosophers, we talk about film and filmosophy with the people who make and who love the movies. And we are thrilled to have as our guest on today's show, Darryl Anka. Daryl has worked in the film industry for over 40 years, creating miniatures, sets, and storyboards for several action and sci-fi films such as Iron Man, Pirates of the Caribbean, Star Trek, and others. Daryl has written, produced, and directed 3 independent films, has authored 2 sci-fi novels, and is currently developing an escape room experience in Los Angeles. He has also been an international public speaker on metaphysical and spiritual topics for nearly 4 decades. And you can learn more about Daryl's entertainment projects at Darryl Anka, that's D-A-R-R-Y-L, DarylAnka.com, and his metaphysical seminars at www.bashar, BASHAR.org. And we'll want to learn more about that as well during the show. Daryl, welcome to the Filmosophers.
Thank you. Thank you both. I appreciate you having me here.
Thanks. So we mentioned in the introduction that you've done movie work for many years. Would you share with us a little bit how you got into it, how you developed your expertise, and maybe share some fun stories about films you've worked on and a little behind the scenes that might amuse, entertain, and enlighten avid film goers.
Sure. I mean, getting into the film industry was actually quite a synchronistic experience because I was interested in miniatures and sets and design, and I was looking around for work to get into the industry somehow. Nothing was kind of revealing itself. And then Star Wars came out, and of course, blew everyone away. And I decided that, that really spurred me to want to get into the industry. But again, there were no openings that I could find. So one day, the movie theater in Westwood that was showing Star Wars posted an ad and said, we're having so much trouble handling all of the lines of the people who want to see this movie that we'll hire anyone on the spot if you come down right now, today. So I said, okay, to myself, I love this movie. I want to study this movie. And if I get the job as an usher at the theater, I'll be able to see the movie as many times as I want for free. So I could really understand how they did all these effects. And so I went down, they hired me, and I worked there for about 3 months. But only during one 20-minute period did I take tickets at the front door because someone had to go on a break. And during that period of 20 minutes out of 3 months, one of the technicians for Star Wars came in and I recognized him, and we started talking. And after the movie, I asked him what he thought, and of course he loved it because he hadn't actually seen the whole movie. He only worked on pieces of it. And as we were talking and I expressed my interest to get into the industry, he actually made the connection for me to go to the people, Industrial Light and Magic, who was in Van Nuys at that time, to have an interview. And because of that interview, I was directed to someone who was now starting a special effects shop and had gotten a job, but they had no employees. So I went over there, I did a test for them, building a model, and I got the job, and had been in the movie industry ever since. So if it wasn't for that one 20-minute period, I wouldn't have gotten in there.
Wow. You won the destiny lottery.
Yeah, exactly. So, from there, the first project we worked on was actually an old TV series that it was done by Jack Webb, which was called Project UFO. I don't know if any of you remember
I
this.
remember.
It was kind of like the UFO version of Dragnet, right? You have Air Force guys going around investigating UFO reports and going, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. And so we worked on that. But then the first movie we worked on was Star Trek, the motion picture, the very first Star Trek film, where we did all the props for them, the phasers, the tricorders, and all of that stuff. And, from there, we just kept getting different jobs. And then I started going to different companies over time, Digital Domain and so on and so forth, who were also hired to do miniatures and sets and things like that for different sci-fi movies. So, one thing just led to another.
Now, as a kid, had you spent time assembling Revell models or something?
Oh, absolutely. And I used to sometimes build my own in terms of doing little sets and dioramas and things like that. So yeah, I just really love the 3D aspect of it, where you could, turn it around and really see it from all directions and light it and all that kind of stuff, which is one reason why some directors really still love miniatures, despite what you can do, amazing things with CGI. But when you're shooting a miniature, I mean, it's right there. You can light it how you want instantly. It's in the camera. You can see what you've got. So I still share that love of miniatures, even though CGI can do great things.
Right.
Well, I have the same response too when I see old, like the stop motion work of Ray Harryhausen films. It was such an art, and it certainly doesn't have the naturalness or seamlessness of CGI, but it's such a beautiful thing to see. And when miniatures are really done well too, same thing. So your work has always been mechanical. It's not digital at all. You haven't gotten into that at all.
No, I never went in to the digital side of it, because then I started going into things like storyboards and design and stuff like that. So no, I mean, when I was working at one of the effects houses, they started, of course, over time, having the computer people take over more and more and more of the facility as they started going more and more digital. So, we'd be having our shop, and then the owners would come in and go, "Hey guys, do you mind if we sort of block off this corner over here and put some computers?" Like, okay, fine. And then, like several months later, like, "Hey guys, do you mind if we wall off half your shop and put computers?" Like, okay. And then 3 months later, be like, "Hey guys, would you mind working in a tent out in the parking lot? Because we really want to start going." And then they just got rid of all the miniatures altogether. So it was just kind of like, okay, I can see the writing on the wall here. So I started going in a different direction with all that. And especially because, when we saw a lot of these people doing work for commercials and films, we would constantly be walking through that area, and I would see somebody working on, doing rotoscoping or something for, a scene. And 3 months later, I would walk through and they'd still be working on the same scene. And I'm just going, "Oh, this would drive me crazy to work in a dark room for hours a day, working on the same scene for months." So I just said, no, I'm going to go in a different direction. That's when I started writing my own scripts and things like that, trying to sell them. And finally got to the point, which I think many filmmakers get to, or screenwriters get to, who get frustrated by not being able to really sell their scripts. And that is, the only way to really prove to the industry that I can make a movie is to make a movie. So, you save up your money, you write a script that's the, least expensive independent script you can write, where you think you have a chance and a shot of actually doing this film. And so, me, my wife, and some friends just decided, let's just do this. Here's the script. And we can raise enough money to do that, and got some friends to pitch in, and went ahead and made our first independent movie, which was called Dearly Departed. And it's kind of a mockumentary in a sense, not necessarily a comedy, but being also interested in spiritual stuff, we kind of wanted to do something a little different. So for Dearly Departed, we said, well, we want to talk about reports that people have of near-death experiences and things like that, but we don't want to make a straight documentary. So we said, well, hey, why don't we make a movie as if we took a camera into the afterlife and actually interviewed the spirits of the dead to get their take on life after death, and use the information that we've gleaned from near-death experiences. So that's what we did for our first movie.
Were you able to find an audience for it? Did you
Yes, I mean, it's still bringing in money slowly over time. You know, small independent films don't usually find a huge audience, but we do find that it is somewhat evergreen, and it is constantly bringing in a little bit of money here and there, as with the other two films we've done as well. So, you know, we again realized that over time, small independent films are not necessarily the most lucrative, you know, source of income. So that's why now, you know, while I'm still very interested in making certain movies, we are kind of shifting our business and going into the escape room business. I don't know how many people in your audience know what that is yet. It's still a relatively new form of entertainment, but it's where you design an environment in a room or several rooms with a theme, and people go in there and they have to find clues and solve puzzles to get out of the room in a certain amount of time, usually an hour. And this is kind of a natural extension for a filmmaker, because you're still building sets, you're still telling stories, you're still doing certain kinds of effects, but now you have your customers actually in the movie, so to speak, as they go through the story and the various rooms to find out what's going on and solve clues and puzzles and things like that. And it's a much more stable business financially. So we're hoping that having that will also allow us to do more movies in the future as well.
and that'll be starting in LA, Daryl, the escape room?
Yes, we're doing that in Los Angeles, actually in Calabasas, an area of Los Angeles. And hopefully we'll be opening sometime this fall. I'm not sure exactly when, but we'll get it done and open this fall.
Do you have multiple themed rooms, or are you starting just with one?
We'll start with one, because again, it's about expense, and you know,
Yeah.
it does some doing to put
Yeah.
one of these together. I'm still working on all the puzzles, even though the space itself is now decorated. Then we have enough room in that particular location to eventually do a second adventure, and then we'll expand from there, which is what escape rooms usually do. Because once you do one, you usually can't do it again. So the way escape rooms stay alive is they keep creating new adventures in new places. We're in a building where hopefully we can actually expand into the building that we're in now. And if not, like many escape rooms, we'll go and find other locations and put some new adventures in there as well.
Have you ever done, Dean, have you ever done one of the escape room experiences?
Nope. Have you?
I did in Chicago a couple of years ago, and in New York on Long Island a couple of years ago. I love it. You know how some people travel the country riding all the great roller coasters?
Yeah.
Or going to each baseball park, by the time and money, I'd visit every escape room in the country.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
I love
of
it. So
there's
fun.
a lot of enthusiasts that do that. They actually travel in groups. They will go to a different city. They'll do all the major escape rooms in that city, and then they'll go back to the website and they'll write reviews and let other people know, you know, what they thought the best ones were, and so on and so forth.
And have you done that yourself? Have you visited a number enough to kind of have a sense of how, you know, what you want to curate, obviously?
Yes, absolutely. We've done several. We've learned a lot, because you know, this was a new business for us as well. We didn't really understand how it worked. And we were fortunate enough to also form relationships with a lot of the people that either operate escape rooms or talk about them and visit them. So we've had some good mentoring to help us through the process to make sure that we're not making too many mistakes as we start this new business.
Fun. Any experiences from your movie making time, doing miniature work on Star Trek, or, you know, Iron Man or Pirates, or any that stand out, kind of fun anecdotes or stories to share?
Well, I mean, I've always loved Star Trek, and we got a chance to work on 3 different Star Trek films, and both the original and Next Generation. I mean, one of the great fun things is being on the Enterprise bridge set and getting to sit in the captain's chair and, you know, just sort of fantasize a little bit. You know, so things like that are fun. We worked with some really fun, you know, directors, you know, like on Iron Man, Jon Favreau, and Roland Emmerich on The Day After Tomorrow and things like that. So, you know, it was all about really studying and learning what the directors were doing. And that formed a lot of my own experience in being able to be confident enough that I could at least start to direct a movie, which is always still a learning experience. But let's see, I don't know, funny stories. I mean, there are some weird things that have happened. I'll try to bring up some as we go further in this interview. But in terms of making our own films, I'd say one of the most important things we learned is to sort of trust what appear to be either mistakes or mishaps that might actually seem like an obstacle to getting the film done. But by staying kind of in a positive state, and here's kind of where the spiritual side comes in, we found out that the things that were happening and the things we were forced to do and the directions we were forced to go down because of these so-called errors or mistakes or, you know, quote unquote negative things that happened actually gave us more opportunity to improve the film. For example, we saw that in our first movie, we had 2 investors, and literally we had already built all the sets, or several of them, hired the actors, and then the second investor had to back out. So we literally had to shut the production down, destroy the sets, let the actors go. Now, you know, that would have seemed to be a devastating blow, but we said, all right, we're ultimately going to make this movie, but the lesson number 1 we learned is don't start making the movie until you have all the money in the bank. Never assume you're going to get the rest of it if you don't actually have it in your hand. That was the big lesson number 1. So we've never done that again. But the other thing was, I'm not going to mention names, but there were 2 actors out of all of the actors we hired that, you know, they were okay, but they weren't really ideal for the parts. And by having to wait a year to start again and get enough money to be able to start production again, we were able to rehire every single actor we wanted, except for the 2 that we didn't really want. They couldn't come back. So we looked around and actually found 2 actors that were much, much better for those 2 parts. So it actually improved the film to have to wait a year and start again. So we turned what appeared to be, you know, a terrible downside into something that actually worked better for the movie. And I would say that just maintaining that attitude of persevering, going forward, and trusting the flow of how things work out, things usually work out.
Yeah, I think one of the classic stories of readjusting the film to accommodate a disaster was Bruce Lee's last film. Somehow this wound up with actual Bruce Lee in about half of it, and then he was gone. And so they rewrote the script so that he had been something terrible, something dastardly had been done to him, and he had to have plastic surgery on his face. And then they brought in a different actor for the second half of the film. And they also brought in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. There's a scene where the bad guys are all sitting around a table hatching their dastardly plots. And at the end of the scene, there's, all this time Kareem has been sitting as another bad guy has been sitting in the corner, by the way. And so that's where they picked him up somewhere along the way.
Yeah, there's always a way to sort of make things work if you really persevere and are just imaginative and creative enough. And sometimes it's better for the story.
It happened too with a Terry Gilliam film, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, I think it was called. I don't know if you remember seeing that. It was very unusual. Heath Ledger had been, I think, cast in the original role. They'd shot a lot of film. Heath passed away during the making of the film, and Terry Gilliam decided to have 3 different actors play the same role, with maybe without much explanation as to why this character's face kept changing during the movie. But that was his solution.
That was pioneered by Louis Buñuel in The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. There's two different actresses play the love interest, and
Ah.
they alternate randomly.
Anyway, Daryl, it's a lovely story of faith and persistence and patience and trust. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's always an alternative. You just have to look for it.
By the way, if not you personally, your work may have crossed paths with the work of my late brother, Ross Slider. He was a photographer and he did sets. He sometimes he went out on location and took the photos, sometimes not. And he worked in the world's largest dark room, which is in Burbank, blowing these things up and making backdrops. Such as on the TV series Frasier, that Seattle skyline that you would see from Frasier's balcony. My brother shot that. The iconic shot of the moon that Elliot and E.T. pedal across the face of the full moon on the bicycle. My brother shot that. And on the first Star Wars film, there are shots where the people are running through the long corridors of the Empire's craft, whatever that is. They're running toward the camera, and my brother made the corridor look twice as deep by taking a photograph of the corridor and then pasting it in the back of it.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of that was done back then.
Right. And my brother, by the way, hated computers. He was completely allergic to them, never wanted to know anything about them, and managed to never know anything about them.
Yeah, a lot of things can be done without them. And again, I don't hate them, but I'm a big fan of something live in the camera if it's at all possible.
When you see movies that utilize miniatures, even of past days gone by, you must view them very critically with either great appreciation or scorn, depending on the skill of execution.
Yeah, sure. Because I can usually tell when a miniature is being used if it's not done correctly, and if it's not shot correctly. Because definitely different lenses to shoot miniatures. Although toward the end of when I was working in miniatures, I don't think for the last 5 years of that career, I don't think I made a miniature that was smaller than my living room. I mean, they started really realizing that it's much easier, even though it's a miniature, it still has to be large enough so that you don't have to necessarily light it too differently than a full size, structure. For example, we did, I don't know if you ever saw it. There was a film called Stealth about a futuristic airplane that was computer controlled, AI controlled. And there was a scene in there where there was some, I think, terrorists in a 20-story tall building hiding out or something. And in the storyline, the plane like dropped a missile down through the building. It went like through the roof all the way down to the basement and blew up. So the building collapsed just like a demolition building. Well, they're not going to collapse the real 20-story building. So we had to build a miniature, but the miniature was 2 stories tall.
Wow.
And it was sitting on top of a 3-story steel structure. So the whole thing was 5 stories up in the air. We had to literally ride in cherry pickers to construct this thing on top of the steel structure, assembling it a piece at a time. And we had to do this twice because the mechanism inside is when they triggered it would make it all collapse perfectly like a demolition. So miniatures got pretty big toward the end in order to resolve the problem of being too small to look realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, CGI obviously keeps getting better and better, but I must say there is a certain charm and a dimension of wonder, when you know that things have been done practically. All the helicopters in Apocalypse Now. I love the smell of napalm in the morning. That scene, to know that they were really doing that with real helicopters, or the Muppet movie, 1979, right? Where the challenge was, how do you do puppets, which you've been doing on TV and never showing their legs, because that's where the puppeteer is hiding. How do you put them in a feature film? And if you recall the opening scene of that, which is Kermit sitting, well, that comes a little later, right? And that's one where they're just flaunting it. Here's Kermit with his little legs going round and round on the bicycle, and it's like Henson and Frank Oz and those guys are saying, "Wow, look what we did." And the opening is Kermit sitting on a log in the swamp, singing Rainbow Connection, playing the banjo left-handed, and with his legs conspicuously showing on the log. And they've got him in water. They're deliberately making it difficult, right? Where's Jim Henson? In the water, under the frog, in a waterproof capsule.
That you just have to figure it out.
Yeah. And there's just something great about things having been done that way.
Yeah, well, it's also, again, a lot of, like, especially Peter Jackson. He's known for really liking to do miniatures, which obviously he did a lot of in Lord of the Rings. Because again, it's right in front of you. It's in the camera. You can light it. If you change your mind about changing the angle, that's a long process in CGI. But if the thing is sitting in front of you, you move the camera just like you would in any normal situation, and you've got a different angle. So, and you can change the mood of it instantly by changing the lighting. It's just all practical, and you can tell instantly in the camera what you've got. You don't have to wait 3 months to see the rendering of the CG to go, well, maybe we should have done this that way, and now you've got another 3 months to correct it. So again, just in terms of a lot of practicality, and especially for low budget films, I mean, miniatures to me are the way to go, because there's just no way that a low budget film can afford a lot of CGI.
But I'm always actually a little stunned too, even when I see, really moderate or high budget films where they'll explode the speedboat in the water, or, the house will blow up, and you can see it's, you see the cardboard and styrofoam fly toward you. It's just so cheesy, but I mean, you overlook it because it's movies.
Yeah.
But when it is well done,
yes.
Really appreciate
it. You have to take all that into account. You have to know how it's going to blow up. I mean, there's a lot of science involved in making a miniature that has to do things.
Yeah.
And you have to really use the correct materials that will explode in the right way or collapse in the right way and look realistic. I mean, we had, here's a story. We had, back on Project UFO, we had built a UFO miniature of a spaceship. And we said, because we knew how they had to mount this to film it, we asked them specifically, are you going to blow this thing up or do anything like that? And they said, no, don't worry about it. So we knew we could really reinforce the mounting system in it to take the heavy load of the miniature, which was, pretty big. So we had a steel rod that could screw into a steel ring, which was in the center of the UFO. And I mean, this thing was like a Frisbee made out of steel, right? So we put all this together, and they get on set, and then we finally found out, yeah, we're going to blow this thing up. And we go, wait a minute. we made it so that it, so we couldn't stop them from doing it. And they finally blew this thing up. That steel ring flew across the stage, missed the cameraman by about 2 feet, and embedded itself halfway into the stage wall.
Oh my God.
And I mean, it could have decapitated someone.
You almost had your Alec Baldwin moment. That would have been horrible.
Yeah, that just would have been horrifying.
Wow.
So you have to just really know what's going on before, you really have to find out what they're going to do with this thing before you actually build it.
Aside from that, how was working with Jack Webb?
Interesting. He was an interesting guy. The main story was that he always, this is back in the day, he always wore red socks no matter what, because he was always trying to stamp out communism.
Oh, that's great.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It was a little bizarre working with him. But
Wow.
I mean, he was a nice guy and all that, and everything
Uh-huh.
went fine. But yeah, there were these
His his
interesting
his
little,
his position was clear.
his position was very clear. So yeah, it was interesting. But I mean, we didn't interact with him too much because we
Right.
were off to the side and doing these miniatures and stuff. And I even got to design a couple myself when they kind of ran out of ideas of, well, this UFO report that we're trying to recreate doesn't really describe the UFO. And I said, well, I've seen UFOs. How about I do one I saw? And they go, great, do it. So I got a chance to actually do a miniature of the UFO I had actually seen in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
that was
we're going to segue in a couple minutes to talking about some of your favorite films. But since you brought up Project UFO and UFOs loom large in your life, we take a moment to kind of just tell us that story and how your work with Bashar has evolved.
Yeah, for those that are not familiar with it, I've been a channel for quite a while, and it all kind of started for me when I actually had two very close broad daylight UFO sightings here in Los Angeles, a week apart. An equilateral black triangular ship, blue white light on each point, and a dull orange red light in the center. I had witnesses with me both times. We were driving on the freeway the first time and had this encounter with this thing flying overhead. And the second time in West LA, stopped at a red light over an intersection. And again, a week later, this UFO flies over the intersection. I start taking off after it. And the person in the car with me was leaning out the window, directing me because it was flying over a neighborhood, kind of zigzagging, and we were sort of losing it among the trees. And then finally, we kind of lost sight of it. And I turned the corner and she yelled, stop. And it was like right above us, about 60, 70 feet, and just flew straight up in the blink of an eye. And it was these two encounters that I had that started me going, okay, I need to find out what's going on here, because, people always say these things aren't real. And now I've seen these things physically close up in broad daylight. They were true machines, nothing, unsolid about it. It was as if I was looking at just something as just as solid as a helicopter or anything, a plane.
Practical effects, not CGI.
Yeah, absolutely real. So by starting to investigate more about UFOs and so on and so forth, I found out about other, metaphysical things like psychic phenomena and channeling and so on and so forth. 10 years after the sighting, I was actually introduced to a channel who was conducting seminars. I listened to those seminars for about 6 months and thought the information was interesting and helpful. And then that channel offered to teach a channeling class. Now, I went into it not thinking I'm going to become a channel myself. I just wanted to further my research because I didn't understand how channeling could be taught. I thought it was something that just sort of happened to people, out of the blue. So when I was in the class, about 6 weeks in, we were under guided meditations given by the entity coming through the channel. And during the meditation, I just, all I can say is I describe it as if somebody just sort of shoved a CD in my head suddenly, and a memory came back of having made an agreement to do the channeling in this life. I understood who Bashar was instantly. I understood the UFO had been shown to me on purpose by him to get me to start doing the research I needed to do, so that by the time it came time to start doing the channeling, I would be ready. Now, all of this flashed in my head in a split second, literally, and I hadn't said anything. But the minute this happened and I had an image of Bashar in my mind, the entity coming through the channel teaching the class stopped talking to the class, turned right to me and said, there is an entity here for you right now if you're ready to begin. I was a little startled by this because I hadn't said anything. And then I happened to glance behind me. One of the people in the class somehow had also picked up on the image of Bashar that I had in my head. And she was actually sketching it on a piece of paper. So I already had two outside validations that this wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't just my imagination. Something real was happening here. So I decided, okay, I'm going to explore this. I went ahead and kept practicing. I did well enough that the teacher asked me to co-channel the next class with him, which, by the way, is where I met my current wife. So I did better and better. And eventually a woman came along who was doing the first psychological thesis paper on the connection between psychology and channeling. And I became one of her study subjects. I would go to her house, I would channel for her friends, and she would write her note, take her notes and write her paper. So the first week was like 5 friends, and then the next week was like 10. Word of mouth started spreading, more and more people started coming. We had to start doing it twice a week in her house. And then we have to start renting places to do it because we were outgrowing the house in terms of the number of people that were showing up. People started recording it. They started sharing the tapes with their friends. I started getting invited to different cities, then different countries. And here I am almost 40 years later, still doing that.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And I don't want this to sound frivolous, but what is there is there an alien perspective on
what's going on? What's
on
going
human
on?
films?
Just about anything.
On films, on movies?
I mean, unless people ask a specific question about it, not so much. I mean, the one time I remember somebody asking directly of the entity, do you have movies on your planet? And he said, no, we just watch you. So
we're like their tropical fish tank.
Yeah, but he was implying that we're enough, we're interesting and entertaining enough for what they're doing, that they don't necessarily have that art form. But it was a joke, but at the same time it was serious, because that's what this particular entity purports to do, is act as a first contact specialist, and that this is the way they introduce it, by having a dialogue, a communication in some way, shape, or form that doesn't necessarily force people to believe that it's coming from an extraterrestrial. It could be a portion of my higher consciousness, because I can't prove he's real. I have my own validations because of the UFO I saw and stuff, but it's the information that's important, and that's what we share with people, is whatever comes through, and his commentaries on life, how to improve your life, how reality works, so on and so forth.
And of all that has come through, is there some one kind of overarching message?
Yes, the overarching message is basically that it's very, very important to actually follow and act on your passion in life, because to them, passion is a frequency, and that frequency is representative of your true self and who you really are and how you will actually be most successful in reality. So there are a number of things that the entity who we call Bashar has given as almost literally a toolkit that people can use and apply in their lives. And every time someone gets it and really applies it the way that he's describing it, they always come back and say, I put this in my life, I followed these procedures, and my life has improved dramatically. So, that's the reason I keep doing it, is I keep getting feedback that regardless of whether you believe that Bashar is real, the information actually does work and represents how we experience and create the realities that we truly prefer. So for that reason, that's why I've kept doing it for 40 years almost. And by the way, Bashar is not his name. They don't, in their reality, they don't really have names like we do. They're telepathic, they don't need them. But he knew we needed to call him something other than hey you. So in the initial contact I had that I described in the channeling class, that word was there. Now, I thought it was his name, but I found out much later that it's actually an Arabic word, and that was chosen, I guess, by him because part of my background is Arabic. I'm half Arabic and half Irish. And so the word itself, even though it's not his name, is appropriate to what he's doing. The word in Arabic means messenger or bringer of good news. So I don't speak Arabic. I had no idea what that was, but somehow he was able to plant that word in my mind as a representation of what he is and what he's all about. So yeah.
Wow. I'm looking for a punchline, but what do you do? What do you get when you cross an Arab and an Irishman?
You get a Canadian. That's what that's what I am.
Perfect.
Are you related to Paul Anka? He's Canadian.
Yes, we're cousins. There's only one
Ah,
family with that last name
uh-huh,
that I'm aware of.
uh-huh.
All right.
So yeah,
Okay.
we're cousins. Yeah, we're cousins.
Glad I asked.
Yeah, yeah. So, so actually, uh, how you explain the kind of the placeholder name of Bashar, I think brings us to a favorite film of yours, which I had not seen and I watched last night, and it was
Oh wait.
fantastic, which is Arrival,
Oh
Oh,
gosh.
it's great. It's great. I love it. One of
where
my
the
favorite ET
yeah,
films.
where the aliens get the placeholder names of Abbott and Costello, which is fantastic, of course.
Yeah, I love that movie. I thought it's brilliant.
I
Yeah,
think it's brilliant too. It was so well done.
And so
And the
different. So
yeah,
different.
yeah, and don't want to give anything away to anyone who hasn't seen it. Just
right.
to let the audience know if you haven't seen it, Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner are scientists. She's a linguistics expert. He's a physicist who are recruited by the military to try to decipher the language of aliens that have just arrived on Earth. And it's just there's some amazing story developments that are just to me mind blowing and
Yeah.
so beautifully executed.
Yeah, and I think also very much more representative of a possible ET contact than a lot of ET films have been. It's just very well produced. It's just very well shot. It's very well directed.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and very well written.
Yeah, and the design of the ships, the design of the aliens, just gorgeous.
Yeah, unusual. And
Yeah.
the whole translation thing is really a
Yeah.
cool concept.
Yep.
So yeah, anyone that hasn't seen Arrival, please, I highly recommend that you watch it.
It was so, I mean, it was so satisfying too, because I mean, I love a good sci-fi movie, but it had such dimension and the reveal was just so satisfying.
Yeah, the twist is really interesting how they sort of played with your mind about
Yeah,
what was.
yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you saw it, Dean.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys for
Definitely. Yeah.
pulling my coat to that one.
One of your other favorites that you mentioned, Daryl, we'll talk about that a little bit, is 1983's The Dead Zone, David Cronenberg film, a Stephen King adaptation, which is one of my favorites too. I've seen it so many times.
Yeah, Christopher Walken.
Yeah, it's just, and you know, it's a little dated. It's 40 years old, but
A little dated, but it's very apropos for today.
Oh yeah. Tell me about it with the from the standpoint of the
I'm not going to give that away either, but
the charismatic political figure who
it's very apropos for today, even though it's older film. Yeah.
This is Christopher Walken plays Johnny Smith. I think he's in a car accident. He awakens with a psychic power, an intuitive power that reveals itself in times of distress.
Yeah.
With other people. Dean, have
so,
you seen The Dead Zone? you recall?
Either if I saw it, it was too long ago to remember.
Okay.
Watch it again.
Okay.
It's just and that's so brilliantly done. The scenes where he has his psychic episodes, the way they're intercut with the current reality, and his just his physicality.
Mhm.
In how you remember how he represents the shock of witnessing what he's witnessing.
Yeah.
And it's got a great supporting cast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lovely film. It's a really, again, well done.
The brilliant David Cronenberg film that made the biggest impression on me was Dead Ringers.
Mm-hmm.
With Jeremy Irons?
Jeremy Irons as identical twin killer OBGYNs.
Oh, you just gave it away.
Well, yeah, but
Spoiler alert.
but to see Jeremy Irons playing the nuances of twin A, who is the outgoing, charismatic one, and who does public relations and fundraising, and twin B, who is more introverted and the researcher and so forth, and then doing occasionally twin A passing himself off as twin B and vice versa. The subtle and at one point it's twin A passing himself off as twin B, imitating twin A, mocking him. Keeping all those layers going at once, that is brilliant.
Yeah.
What
seen
what
that.
tell us more about the Dead Zone and what, just how that affected you and how that made your list.
It just it was just very atmospheric. The music, I love the theme. I just thought all the pieces came together really well. It was unexpected. The twist was brilliant at the end, because it still worked out, even though not the way that you thought. And again, it's kind of an early warning for hubris. The hubris in politics, the hubris in certain, the way people think of things. But it's also kind of about, loneliness, the loss he suffered because of the gift he was given, but it cost him a lot in his life.
Yes.
I just thought it's a very moving depiction of a person who receives what is ostensibly a gift, but kind of at the same time he experiences it as a curse. And so it's a kind of a neat polarized kind of storyline, but
No,
I just thought well done.
You're right. It is a very poignant aspect of the film, his lonely journey. And are you a Cronenberg fan? Do you like a lot of his other stuff?
Yeah, in general. I can't name, like all of the movies and stuff like that, but there are little ones that stand out and pieces that stand out to me.
Videodrome is crazy.
Yeah, I think I've seen it once, but it's been a while. So
I think the Fly with Jeff Goldblum was Cronenberg, wasn't it? I think
it was great. Yeah, The Fly was great.
Yeah,
no, I'm definitely a fan, but I can't name everything.
I love his twisted sensibilities, and I love that he gets to make movies.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it's his film of Naked Lunch.
Oh,
of the William Burroughs novel. Oh my God, yeah. Oh,
yeah. I don't think I saw that one.
Oh, it's about as weird as you can stand.
Is it David Lynchy? More than David.
It's Cronenberg on steroids.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Cronenberg without any oversight.
You're right.
Daryl, any of the other movies that you listed that you'd like to touch on? I've got a few more I can mention, but go ahead.
Well, I love Road to Perdition. It's the second one I mentioned there. Again, just really solid storytelling, solid filmmaking, solid characters. I love Tom Hanks anyway, but I think it's one of my favorites that he's ever done, just because of the depth. And I mean, it got Paul Newman in it, and Daniel Craig in one of his early roles, before he became famous as James Bond.
Connor Rooney.
Connor Rooney, yeah, Connor. But it's just a solid story that I thought was really well done as a period piece. It really felt realistic to me in terms of how the story played out and how everything went down. So I just really love the tone of the film and the execution of that movie, the lighting, the cinematography I thought was great.
I happened to rewatch it 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
I saw it when it came out, but watched it 2 weeks ago, and I fell in love with it again.
Yeah.
And it's just, to me, it's mesmerizing, the whole thing. It's got that wonderful Thomas Newman score.
Oh, I love Thomas Newman. Yeah.
Sam Mendes directed it, and for those who haven't seen it in our audience, could see Road to Perdition.
Yeah, and speaking of Thomas Newman, right? The Player, I believe, is also one of his scores, and I love that film too. I mean, there's so many films I didn't mention in this list. Die Hard, I'm a big fan of Die Hard. But yeah, Thomas Newman. I think we were actually in our last independent film. We were kind of inspired by Thomas Newman to sort of. I had this brilliant composer in England do a score for that film, and we just sort of gave him the idea of just sort of go in the direction of Thomas Newman. Don't copy anything, but let us feel that it was inspired by that, and he did a brilliant job capturing some of that feeling that Thomas Newman gives to a score. Yeah, so I love his scores.
The Last of the Mohicans was also on your list.
Yeah, also a favorite of mine. Again, a wonderfully done period piece that I think really captured the time. A great story, very iconic. I'm also a big fan of American Indian stories, and the fact that they sort of really played into what was going on with that, I really enjoyed a lot. There was a film that's now on Hulu, by the way, called Prey. Have you seen that?
I saw it. Wasn't that fun?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Again, the period piece and almost all American Indian actors, with the first time, theoretically, the first time that a predator has been on Earth, and they're dealing with it, and how the main character, the woman, dealt with that. It was a fun movie. It was a fun movie.
There are one or two videos you can find online about the incredibly intense preparation that Daniel Day-Lewis went through to play Last of the Mohicans. The physical training, the fighting, the learning tomahawk skills. Everywhere he went, he was carrying his rifle. They got the right guy there. I mean, the actor famous for fanatical preparation and for never breaking character.
Right. Yeah, and I love the theme, the score as well of that. I thought it was very moving.
Mm-hmm. It was beautiful.
Yeah,
I don't know if you saw. There's a series on Hulu now. Actually, I think Martin Short and Steve Martin. To get the only murders in the building. Have you seen it at all?
I haven't seen it yet, so please don't spoil anything.
Okay.
All right. I haven't had time to look at
watch it and tell me. I'm sure you'll get the Last of Mohicans reference. I won't say anything more than that.
Okay. Great.
Yes,
I will. It's on my list to watch.
Okay. All right. Okay. You will get a kick out of that. No, that was beautiful. That was Michael Mann, I think. Yeah. And that was such attention to detail that.
Yeah.
To me, that a movie maker like that's the authenticity and attention to detail, period detail.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful film.
Yeah, really beautiful. And Wes Studi, who plays the antagonist in that, he's great in everything. I see he's been in so many great films, huh?
Yeah, so intense.
Really intense. Yeah. Magua. He was great. Well, we're at about close to an hour. Is there anything more you'd like to touch on or dwell on, or?
Just if people want to know what we're doing here, they can
please.
My site, which is darryllanka.com, DARRYLANKA.com, to see what I'm up to, and anything they want to find out about the channelings and metaphysical talks that I do, they can go to bashar.org, which is BASHAR.org, and they'll find everything there dealing with all of that. And like I said, we're hopefully opening this escape room in the fall. We'll let everyone know. We'll send out information on that when it's ready, and I hope everyone will come and play, because it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd come to LA just for that.
Okay.
Great.
But thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat about this stuff that we all love. So thanks. It was fun.
Thank you, Dean. Anything more before we break?
No, this is great. Thank you so much, Daryl.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and see you at the movies.
See ya.
Thank you, Daryl. Really grateful. Nice to meet you. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us on the Filmosophers Movie Talk Show. Please subscribe to stay up to date on our newest episodes.